this morning. Da-da-da-da. How are you all out there in Facechook land? Hey! Oh, plugs in. Oh, hello, my name's Quinlan. Welcome to Facechook Live. Da-da-da. Melbourne Musos, how are you? Quinlan, that's what I said. Okay. Now what I'm going to do tonight is going to take you through a bit of a historical leaning, is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with this. When the saints go marching, when the saints go marching. Trad jazz, which is comes from New Orleans second line rhythms, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. When you're talking about second line rhythms from New Orleans, we're talking about 19th century into the 20th century music. It comes from the blues and all that, and it comes from that genre. And what we have is this. You've got that kind of and what would happen is that I'm using the hi-hat there, but this is a marching band. You know, how do you walk down the street? You know, is your drum kit on a flatbed truck or anything like that? No. What you had was a pair of hi-hats with the old leathers in, and you're going all that sort of stuff, you see. And what goes on is that created a backbeat, and that's that kind of thing. And then what happened with that is that the bass drum, which we know best actually as a 3/2 clave, okay? And what happens with that on the snare drum, notice it with the hi-hat, splash hats. Later on, I'll have a 4-camera shoot for you all there, and you've got the dodgy odd sock cam down below, and I'll show you how to do that. Well, I'm actually showing it to you now. There it is there. So what happens is that with second-line rhythms that came out of New Orleans in America, and, you know, like the home of jazz and all that stuff, what you had was a variation on what we best know as like a Latin beat, right? But they'd swing it. This turned into ragtime. Scott Joplin and, you know, that kind of thing. The Entertainer. And there you go. You don't want me warbling all the way through, do you? Maybe not. Anyway, there you go. So what happens is that's ragtime and all that. And one of the big things about jazz is the fact that there's two feels. You have the 4 feel. I talked about this last week with dear Jimmy Cobb, Miles Davis's drummer for the Kind of Blue album, and this is like a sequel. A feathered bass drum, you see, so you get that kind of thing. And what happens is it's a 4 feel. Now, one of the things about trad jazz, getting straight into it, is that one of the greats was Baby Dodds. And Baby Dodds was Louis Armstrong's drummer of the day. And he was fantastic with press rolls. And as far as I know, there's only one piece of footage of him actually doing press rolls towards the twilight years of his life, in the 40s, of him demonstrating a press roll. And it was in, scratchy black and white. As far as I know, that's the only one around of him. So please check it out. It's on the YouTubes and all that. So you got that Baby Dodds. Press, 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 press. And then there's a two feel. Right, left, right, left, right, left. And the whole thing about trad jazz, traditional jazz, and ragtime and all that, is it's fairly, it's got its own kind of little quirky feel about it, like lots of all that kind of stuff, right? The late great Alan Brown, Melbourne jazz drummer, was great at his trad. Was it the Red Onions? Of course it was. Okay. There you go, you see. So that's your trad jazz. I better work quickly because I've got quite a few decades to go through, okay? A century's worth, in fact, so I'll get cracking. That is Baby Dodds' Press Roll City. He was brilliant at it. In the 20s, swing jazz started to develop out of trad jazz. And one of the things is that with swing, you'd still have, say, the 4-feel or the 2-feel, depending. I've got a 4-feel happening down there. And then people like Chick Webb and Cozy Cole. Now, later on in the show, or later on when I do the edit, the 4-camera shoot and all that for Channel 31, later on, and if we have a later on, well, anyway, that's another story. But what goes on is I'll be posting pics of all these wonderful, wonderful, brilliant, innovative drummers, okay, that make up what I'm talking about tonight, okay? So what we've got is Chick Webb, who happened to be Buddy Rich's favourite drummer. There you go. So there it is there. And Cozy Cole was a stalwart of the time. And what would happen is you'd peel things away. If we've got trad jazz and we're playing it straight and straight ahead. Do you know all of Brigida? Well, there's that. Take out the snare. And people like Chick Webb. What he would do was do things like a snare drum hit when you had the trumpets going, sort of thing. And there it is. By all accounts, he had this incredible right foot, okay, like really, things like that. So he's the Chick Webb orchestra of the time. Whoosh, We're talking about a young Duke Ellington as well in the 1920s and all that stuff. So there you go there. And he overcame a lot of, how would you put it, physical obstacles to do what he did. He was, look it up. There it is there. But yeah, he had a few physical obstacles and he overcame them like a champ. There you go, and there you go. So what would start to happen is that there's your 20s stuff. And that would happen. Then in the 30s, you started to get people like Count Basie Orchestra and all this sort of stuff. And one of the most thrilling kind of drummers that I would see, any excuse, Chris, to play brushes, there you go, was Papa Joe Jones, Mr. Debonair himself. The little tricks that he used to do, you know, I can't do them. Other people can. Papa Joe Jones. Now, last week, I actually described this brush pattern because of Jimmy Cobb and all that. And that's what would happen. Now, I'm going to show you the second one, because I only showed you one last week. You see, this is the first one. And what it is you've got two interlacing ovals, if you like. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the left brush would put in the task. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, if I went side to side, like right, left, like that, the crotchet, I'm working quick, the crotchet would be on this side of the drum, at least for me. You can change it around. You see, I'm overlapping. And then what happens, I'll put it up here for the sake of you. You see the flick? Go have a listen to, or go have a look at Papa Joe Jones doing brushes. And then what happens is you've got your slow one for the ballads, which is last week's one. Then you get to the point where it's like changing gears, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. See, I'm doing a lot of work for what is slow, medium tempo there. And then I would morph into the... And there's Papa Joe Jones. He was seen as one of the main dudes in the 1930s. Count Basie Orchestra. Again, one of, I believe, seeing I've mentioned Buddy Rich, and his favourite drummer at the time was Chick Webb, with the Chick Webb Orchestra. Whenever Buddy Rich got asked, who's your favourite big band, he would always say Count Basie. And Papa Joe Jones held down that gig for decades, I tell you. And there you go. So there's the brushes. I'm going to come back to them. But that was the 30s. Okay? So what would happen is with a big band, you'd have to push. And you've got to remember that in the 30s, it's not like some gigantic PA system was out there or anything like that. So what would happen is that your solid 4 on the floor or a solid 2 feel or whatever would be underpinning the double bass. That's what's going on there. So hence last week talking about baby socks and all that, feathering the bass drum, but a consistent 4 on the floor. I did that last week. And I'm moving right along. What happened then was World War II, okay, World War II, and we all went off. Dad went off. Everybody went off. Fought the fascist bastards, that kind of thing. And won, finally, not without a lot of pain and all that sort of stuff. And what happened was during that time, there was a transformation. Big band music ruled through the war years up until the war finished in 1945. And then after that, there was no money. We were all broke. Okay, I can say we because it was the family. I can tell you stories about my family during the World War. There you go, sort of stuff. But I won't. I'll leave that for another day. And what goes on there. with much love. Anyway, so what goes on is when everyone came home from the war, no money. Everyone was broke. So there was no more big bands, no money to pay the band. Can't pay the band, mate. So everything broke down. But during that time, you had people like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and all this sort of business. And they had a drummer by the name of Kenny Clark and then Max Roach. And Kenny Clark is a little bit of an undersung hero because he was a New York drummer, but he left early for Gay Paris, in Europe. So he took himself out of the hubbub, the heartbeat of it, but he started it. And what happened is that bebop, by its sort of definition, is usually a very quick, nimble kind of music. So the four on the floor started to feel like you were pushing an elephant uphill. That kind of thing. So Kenny Clark was one of the first drummers to sort of take it out and just make the rhythm really toppy. All cymbals. You can play, Oh, there you go. Ding, 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 ding. Ornithology. What are you doing, Chris? Come on, don't get carried away. So what goes on is then you had Kenny Clark, but Max Roach is seen as the defining dude of that time, because it was almost like his kind of independence. I go on about polyrhythms and polymetrics and all sorts of different things like that. But Max Roach was the kind of guy whose independence seemed to be, for me, cut down the middle. And what that meant was he kept a... And then it seemed like someone else was his left hand. One of his great bands was, I've got a double album out in the back with Clifford Brown, one of the great young stars who sadly passed away far too early in a motor accident, car accident. Broke Max Roach's heart apparently, and it would too. Brilliant. Now, Max Roach was famous for things like Mr. Hi-Hats. People like Steve Smith loves doing Mr. Hi-Hats, and he was the last concert, the Steve Smith one, with all my mates, Kevin, Angelo, everybody, and our little prog rock crew, we all went along, loved it. That was one of the 20 years ago. I filmed Steve Smith for Melbourne Musos, and that was, I would actually put that down as amongst my most cherished memories for the show over the last 25 years, because I had Steve Smith and then Billy Cobham came into the room, and I just saw Steve Smith just light up, as in, like that. So I saw a hero bowing to another hero, if you know what I mean. Crazy days. That was at the Continental Cafe in Greville Street. 1998, maybe? 99, something like that. I got a photo. Might post it later. I gave Steve... it must have been a bit later because Steve Smith was right into Austin Powers. He was all shagadelic. So I had a pink floral shirt, and I gave it to him. I just said, here, I bought you this. I didn't buy it. I had it. And he wore it on stage. It was brilliant. Does anyone remember that gig? It was about the late 90s, Continental Cafe, Steve Smith. Anyway, he was great with Max Roach's Mr. Hi-Hat. And then Max Roach also did the drum also waltzes and stuff like that. So when you're talking about things like that in the 40s and the advent of bebop jazz, there's always three drummers that I tend to always go back to. Kenny Clark, Max Roach, and now I will mention Art Blakey. Oh, man, Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. Whoa, that's where a young Wayne Shorter started. And what happens with Art Blakey, we used to affectionately call... I was in a band, 1980, called Trio Arcane. And we were pretty avant-garde. We were out there. We got to mention the paper and all the other stuff. Bob Settergreen was a great hero of the band. He used to mention them in his talks, or mention us in his talks, apparently. I didn't even know until a bass player told me once. I said, no, I remember that name, Bob Settergreen. Anyway, I thought, thank you, Bob. And the last time I saw Bob was at Dear Alan Zavod's funeral. Anyway, I don't want to digress. But what it is I would get hey, Chris, can you give us some of those Art Blakey bombs? It'd be like, he's just a pushy drummer. It was like... Go have a listen. I got one with... I got a sort of a jazz all-stars album, vinyl out there. And it's Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, and I'm not sure if it's Charles... It might be Al McKibben, actually, on bass, but it was Art Blakey on drums. Whack! Whack, whack! 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 Ooh, tasteless, I hear you say, but my God, how dynamic. Oh, wow. He was fighting for a cause, that guy. He was pushing. But, the Art Blakey bomb. Back. You see, the big rim shots aren't just, they're not just Bonham. You've got to remember there was plenty of rim shots happening before our Bonzo. And there you go. Art Blakey. There you go. And then that's the 40s. And then all that went into the 50s. And then you had people like Philly Joe Jones, no relation to Papa Joe Jones. And he was part of Miles Davis's first great sextet with John Coltrane and people like that. Working and steaming with the Miles Davis sextet. And the beautiful thing about that, and I've got a great excuse to go back to brushes, is because I mentioned last week that I found a treasure trove of these little books. And you know where I found them? Lamberti Brothers in North Melbourne, okay, in about 1990. Oh, the Motherlode! And they had something like 4 copies of Philly Joe Jones's brush artistry, and I'm feeling like a complete dill because they're sitting over there and I should have them here and I should be showing them to the camera. I'm going to put it up in the 4-camera shoot as an inset, and that's Philly Joe Jones. He put that out through the Premier Drum Company, and I think it was about 1968, but he used to have all these beautiful ballad circles and stuff. So when Miles went off to do My Funny Valentine, Sweet Comic Valentine, oh, Philly Joe Jones on the brushes in the back, all these different things. He'd have all these different little ones. I've got 2 main ones and then I variate them, you see. So I've already shown you the second one and the first one I showed you last week. And so he just... That's an Art Blakey bomb with brushes. I love all that. There you go. We're talking about the mid-50s. I'm up to the mid-50s already. And then what happened? A revolt, a revolution. Ornette Coleman, free jazz. Not because they weren't paid. It was free. Two of Ornette Coleman, he played saxophone. Two of Ornette Coleman's rock steady drummers during all those days, to the point where they played together with his double sextet, I think it was what it was. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was Ed Blackwell and Billy Higgins. Now, I got to see Ed Blackwell at Dallas Brooks Hall in, I believe it was around about 1981, maybe 1980, all that. And it was, and then there was Don Cherry on pocket trumpet. And it was Old and New Dreams, that's the name of the band. And it was basically Ornette Coleman's band, only without Ornette. And there you go, and all that. And Ed Blackwell is so, I don't know, you could say tribal. He was really earthy. It was beautiful. Maybe not that end bit, but anyway. But however, Billy Higgins, oh, what a gent. I saw him on a jazz special on Channel 2 on the ABC, mid-80s, and he was debonair like Jimmy Cobb. Okay, we're talking about a guy who is smooth as silk. Okay, so just that. Now, what would happen now is that if I'm going to quickly jump back to bebop and Max Roach, as I said, I felt like I was hearing a man cut down the middle, in the sense that he'd have this rock-solid jazz feel about him, and it was like someone else was playing the left hand. It was, his independence was uncanny, okay? And all that stuff. And what would happen is that when it got to the 50s, it wasn't the rock-solid jazz rhythm so much. They'd mix it up, like Jimmy Cobb, like I mentioned last week, would mix it up. So you'd have the standard jazz rhythm. And then and the hi-hat, I've mentioned it before, left for the band. Always there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, Billy Higgins. It'd just be that. Oh, it was just like a bed to just, thank you very much, Billy. That kind of thing. And it was just smooth as silk. And now I've mentioned Jimmy Cobb as well. And so that takes us through into the 50s, because when you're talking about Jimmy Cobb and people like that, you're actually talking about the late 50s and, like Ornette Coleman, people like that. That started to come out around about the mid-50s. So there was a real time of melting pot of change. You've got to remember, that's when rock and roll started as well. And the first rock and rollers, like Elvis and people like that, you're playing a jazz rhythm but putting rock and roll over the top, and all that sort of stuff. And there you go. And it wasn't until you had people like Little Richard. Keep it knocking, but you can't come in. Keep it knocking, but you can't come in. And try again. So on it goes, you see. And I did him 3 weeks ago. So the continuity, I'm big on the continuity, I tells you. Anyway, there you go. And that's what goes on there. And by the late 50s into the early 60s, John Coltrane was out there, and he picked up one of the Jones brothers. There's, was it Thad Jones, Hank Jones, and Elvin Jones. Oh! What the hell was going on there? With a smoke hanging out of this cool cat, cool as a cucumber, with the most craziest lines, and they're all based on sort of roly-poly triplets, you know, that kind of thing. So one of the things I'm going to show you here, as far as getting out of the, I'm right down the history side of things, but what I'm going to do is show you, I'll do it on the hi-hat so I can still talk over the top. Right, left, left, I've done, oh, pardon me, pop, 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 Chris. Right, left, so. Right, right, left. Put them both together. All right, left, left, right, right, left. Just mixing it all up. So all of a sudden, the independent side of thing went from, say, if I'm going to be really specific and try and break it down for you, what happens? Max Roach seemed to be, the independents seemed to be down the middle. He had one thing there and another thing there, and absolutely incredible, and all that. Elvin Jones had kind of a horizontal thing happening because he had his stuff over the top, and it almost was like his hands were discombobulated from his feet, if you know what I mean. So you'd still hear this beautiful 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1. And he'd whack away, God, on some of the stuff. And then what would happen is that he was so famous for things like I Love Supreme, John Coltrane. Beautiful drumming on that, classic jazz album. But one of the things about John Coltrane is Giant Steps. It's fantastic. Oh my God, it's a graveyard for many instrumentalists because there's so many chord changes going through the secular fifths and all that stuff, whatever it. What if? And there you go. But the thing about it is things like My Favorite Things and stuff like that. It wasn't actually Elvin Jones. It's funny because I've got him credited on the vinyl album that I've got, but it's actually Roy Haynes on drums. Now, Roy Haynes, I put Jimmy Cobb and Roy Haynes in the same boat because they have the clipped like that kind of thing. You know, clip, 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 you know, that kind of stuff. And I love Roy Haynes' drumming on Chick Corea's first album. Brilliant stuff. And the name of that is Facechook Live. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's shit. I can't remember the name. But anyway, Chick Corea's first album. Oh, damn, Chris, it's right there. Right behind that door. Okay, so there it is there. Anyway, so there's that. Roy Haynes. Okay. He was a debonair gent. I always remember, I'll tell you the Roy Haynes influence that I have is that I read a Modern Drummer magazine and he's a cool cat. He had the cowboy hat on and everything. The pictures, you know, and he's sitting there playing. And he was 60 then, you know, that kind of thing. And he was just, yep, man, and all that. So he's brilliant. And one of the things, man, I got a drum kit in every room. That's my Roy Haynes influence. I got 3 in here. I've got another one there. I've got 2 in the front room. And I don't care. That's Roy Haynes. Ah! But I'm playing like Elvin Jones there. Now, the other guy, Tony Williams, Miles Davis, those symbols of his. It just sounds like Rain on the Rooftop, like I said last week, Tony Williams. And he just went straight through. He was the drummer for Miles Davis's second great quintet, sextet, depending on the album that you're listening to. But essentially, Miles Davis took over from Dizzy Gillespie, trumpet with Charlie Parker's band in the late 40s. And then from the first great sextet with the aforementioned Philly Joe Jones on drums. Whatever Miles Davis did, that's what jazz did, it seemed. There was the offshoots like Ornette Coleman and stuff like that. But the people that Miles Davis brought with him, he just brought people with him the whole time, sort of thing. So, there's that. But now, one of the things with Tony Williams, not to mention the fact that he started with Miles Davis when he was 15, if you don't mind, umpire, you'd start to hear the hi-hat pumping. That kind of stuff there. It was just, and powerful for a kid. He was just, off he went. There's all that sort of stuff. So there you go. ESP. Oh, I'm going to miss out on a few. Miles Smiles, Sorcerer album he was on. There's got to be a dozen albums there through the 60s that were just buy the lot, just go down, get the vinyl. I had one missing for years and years. I taped it off a friend of mine. So it was the one that I played the most because it was in the car, the old Ford XY wagon. The wagon, mate, the Ford XY. You mud. Automatic, mate. No 3 on the tree. No 4 on the floor. Bench seat, mate. Yeah, big tank. Anyway, what it was I had a cassette of the Sorcerer album. Oh, I loved it. And all the years through, the cassette disintegrated. Then there was no more cassettes. I'm sure there's students out there wondering what the hell a cassette is these days. Anyway, but what happened was as soon as good old JB Hi-Fi started bringing the vinyl back in, I was flicking through one, Sorcerer album. And then after something like 20-something or other years, there it is, slotted right in. The Lego is complete. Thank you very much. And that's what that was, the Sorcerer album. I love that album so much. I mentioned last week, if I'm going to shamelessly name drop, that I roadied Dave Holland during those Hallison days and all that. And I had a little box of cassettes, as we all did, on the passenger side floor, and I'd lean over and I'd have Bill Evans' Trio and this one and a Dizzy Gillespie, and I had the Sorcerer album. And I said, would you like to play something, Dave? And he said, play this one, Sorcerer album. And there it is, Sorcerer, Dave Holland. There you go. That was my little roadie story. Anyway, so what goes on is we are now into the 70s. Now, Tony Williams went straight through, as did all of them. They were all still kicking along. But with that, we started to get Bitches Brew with Miles Davis, and all of a sudden you had people like Billy Cobham and Lenny White on the album, and Jack DeJohnette, which I'm going to get to in a second because there's a drum kit in the other room now. I would have pointed over there. I nearly did. But in the front room, there is a drum kit that I bought because of that man. And essentially it's a rosewood kit. Beautiful. Anyway, but what happens is that you started to get Miles Davis albums like Jack Johnson. And the Jack Johnson album, I don't know if you know, but Jack Johnson was a very, very famous heavyweight fighter, heavyweight champion, and a bit of a trailblazer himself. And what it was with that Cobham and that groove, that just the shuffle groove he had on that. Like, keeps on going. Big washy cymbals and all that sort of stuff. Fantastic business. And there you go. Lenny White. Lenny White. One of the things about these drummers is that they all went off and did other things. Like Cobham, Billy Cobham is so famous for being part of the Mahavishnu Orchestra, first incarnation. And Lenny White went off and started Return to Forever with Chick Corea, who I mentioned before, with Roy Haynes. You see, Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. That's the Chick Corea album that I couldn't remember before. Came back to me just then. Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. Chick Corea's first album, yellow cover with a young Chick Corea, sort of like a vignette. Is that what you call it? A vignette of the picture there with the aforementioned. And I believe one of the first flat ride cymbals, and all that, which Jack DeJohnette made famous. They actually just called it the ECM sound, ECM Records. Manfred Eicher. I'm name dropping like crazy because it's a historical show tonight. There you go. So Jack DeJohnette. But what happens? I'm just talking about Cobham and Lenny White with Mahavishnu Orchestra. They became the king of the paradiddle. So you've got a paradiddle, right, left, right, left, right, left, left. I can see you face palming from here, audience. Not the bloody. So you got that. So you put it there. Great thing. Take any paradiddle you want. Add the right foot to the right hand. And then, of course, you have Immigrant Song. Is Kate Ellis Welsh looking? Kate, if you're there, you just came into my head. I hope you're doing well and everything, and all that, because when I was giving Kate Ellis Welsh, I'm gonna put you right in it. She went home to the Welshman and said, "Chris just taught me the immigration song." It's gone. What? Yeah, it's like the immigration song. That's the immigrant song. Oh, I've got to flick in a Bonham crack every now and again. But anyways, Kate, I hope you're well. There you go. So you just add your foot to it. Make it just normal. No, I'm not going to go, but that's what it is. It's a paradiddle. We're talking about Cobham and Lenny White. Things like that. Now, Cobham used to mix them up. Okay, so what would happen is that he'd mix up his paramadoodles so that he could get all the odd times that were required for the Mahavishnu Orchestra and all this sort of stuff. And then what happened, you get all these different kinds of things, all these different time signatures. I often call it sometimes rock beat plus one. And what that means is one of the famous ones is actually Frank Zappa's 13 off of You Can't Do That You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore, Volume 6, CD 2, Track 3. Stretching, Chris, stretching. Anyway, what goes on there is that he was doing 13, and if you're thinking of crotchets being like a bar of 4/4, you would have 8 quavers in them. So therefore, to get to 13, you'd need an extra 5, okay? Now, there's jokes going around about, these are difficult times, but it ain't that hard, sort of thing. 13, I'll never need that. Well, bullshit. Bullshit. You're going to need it, mate. And with Frank Zappa, you've got 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 4, and I love saying hippopotamus, so it'd be hippopotamus 1 2 3 4, 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 hippopotamus 1 2 hippopotamus 1. There you go. One of the other things, you can do things like you can get any groupings of numbers. I remember one thing. I feel like going into King Crimson. I remember one thing. But what happened was a Chad Wackerman clinic about 20 years ago when he was doing the big drummers day. And a guy just yelled out, playing 21. And I think the old Mr. Chad, who I got to know pretty well because he spent a bit of time in Sydney, living in Sydney. And what it was he wasn't in any mood to cop it. What does that mean? Playing 21. What does that mean? You need to subdivide. It's all in 2s and 3s and all that stuff. Billy Cobham was famous for being able to play these crazy-ass time signatures and make them sound simple. You see, so if you're going to play 21, look what I can do. Look how fast I can go and all that sort of business. Well, what's 21? It's 3 7s, okay? So what happened? 3 7s are 21. You learn that in grade 2, okay? I never need that. Bullshit. So what happens is if you're doing a septuplet, I get to say Gina Lola Brigida. So you can get Gina Lola Brigida, Gina Lola Brigida, Gina Lola Brigida. Now I could play that. Does it sound like 3/4 to you? I could be playing 3/4 in septuplets, or if I slowed it down, you could possibly write that as John McLaughlin did in 21/16. It exists, you see. So that's what goes on there. There you go. So there's Cobham, Lenny White, and Jack DeJohnette I'm onto now. Did you notice, if I'm going to start to summarise, because I'm going for an hour now, what's going to happen here is when you're playing, it's taking a bit away. When we're starting up, it's 4 on the floor, 2 feel, all that. Then we take the snare drum away, we take it away. Now the only thing left is really 4-way independence. 1 2 3 4 1 2. Up. This is Jack DeJohnette. John Abercrombie, the famous guitarist, who actually played with Dave Holland and Jack DeJohnette in the Gateway Trio, which I really liked and all that. John Abercrombie said of Jack DeJohnette, Jack's a great drummer. He's got a great beat, if you can find it. Ka-ching! There you go. And from that, don't ever forget the 60s also produced people like Bernard Purdie, Clyde Stubblefield, right? The aforementioned Paramadoodle. And don't ever forget the sampling of the Amen Break by G.C. Coleman, okay? one of the most sampled drummers in the world, all that stuff. And that is, and when you ratchet up that, you're getting into the 90s, okay? So you're sampling, you know, sort of thing, 80s funk. And then getting into the 90s, sampler goes up, and then all of a sudden this amen break and all that sort of stuff is on steroids. And all of a sudden you've got this sort of... all that... all this all over the place stuff. And then that begets pretty much where we were up to about a decade ago. Who remembers dubstep? Is that still going? It's like a halftime. But what happens is that if you're doing what we're doing here with drum and bass, David Bowie's Earthling album with Zach Alford as the drummer. He's French. Why do you think I have this outrageous accent, you silly drummer? And what happens is... oh man, what hands, you know, sort of thing. So bump, bump, bump. So it's got that bump. But what happens if we half time it? If we're going to half time it and do the time signatures like that, some of these figures suddenly turn into 32nd notes instead of 16th notes inside a half-time rhythm. So, got out of that by the skin of my teeth. Maybe not. Oh, there you go. And we're up to now. There you go. So what happens is I've just gone crazily overtime. It's usually a half-hour Facechook. I've done on the way to 50 minutes. Okay, 53 minutes. I'm looking at my little clock. So I better wrap it up. I've got to wrap it up because I think some of my cameras are going to go offline. And maybe my camera there. Maybe I'm not even live. Maybe I've got to do it later. Is that still going okay over there? Yeah, I'm still going. So something will happen. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up now. Normally I would just say, there it is, in a couple of hours with a few bits, and I'll do editing with my editing cordial, and you'll have the full 4-camera HD experience and all that sort of stuff, and it will end up on channel 31. Maybe it won't, because today I delivered episode 736, slated for the 24th of June, which would may be the last week of broadcast for community television in Australia. It doesn't have to happen. There's no reason for it to happen. So I would hope that I can come up with a show 737 on the first day of the new financial year, Wednesday, 10 o'clock, July the 1st. It's sort of up to you to sign something, send it in, make a big noise, because it's a crazy time to do it with all this turmoil that we're in, both within and without. We've got the COVID thing, we've got the troubles everywhere in the world. The whole world is apparently nearly broke. There you go. Without any World War IIs, you know, that kind of thing. Who do we fight? You know, that kind of thing. So what it is stuff like this for free to air. You know that I've been doing the show for 25 years. I love it. It's part of my fabric. I had a holiday for a while. Then they asked me back. just when you're out, they pull you back in. Come in. And all that. But I love it. I love doing it. It's fun. Can you tell? I'm having fun. You know, kind of thing. I love it. And it gives people a voice. And this is one of the things I've been saying for the last little while. You can do anything you want. If you don't like something and you're sitting back on the couch out there and you're having a bit and you go, oh, that's bullshit. Well, get up and ring up, okay, and start a show. That's what community TV is. It's a voice for you, okay? So do something, okay? There you go. I'm yelling at my audience. God help me, Chris. Anyway, there you go. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to go have a beer and edit, and I'm going to give you something later on and all that. I hope you enjoyed what I did tonight. I love talking about the history of jazz. I don't come across like a maniac jazz drummer or anything like that, but I love the genre and all that sort of stuff. I just lived it for a long time and all that. But then I got out into other stuff, and I was always doing it. It was always Jethro Tull there and all that sort of stuff. Growing up in an Irish pub, it was tattooed on the back of our necks. You know, sort of the Celtic. You're a Celt. Okay. And what it is I've mentioned as many wonderful, brilliant musicians as I could. And there's a million more, okay? Of course, there's hundreds more, whatever. But, you know, you're talking about all these people. Baby Dodds, Chick Webb, Cozy Cole, Count Basie, Papa Joe Jones, Kenny Clark, Art Blakey, Max Roach, Philly Joe Jones, Billy Higgins, Ed Blackwell, Elvin Jones, Tony Williams, Bernard Purdy. Did I mention Clyde Stubblefield? I just did then. I've done a whole show on him too. Billy Cobham, Lenny White, Jack DeJohnette, okay, G.C. Coleman, okay. You got all these people. You know, the legacy of the music that these people give us and still continue to give us, you know, that kind of thing. I'll love and leave you now with the last little thing. Did you know that they were all black